Well, thank you for joining us for this month's edition of the African Liberty webinar. My name still is Ibrahim Babatunde Anoba, and I am so pleased to have Professor Catherine Kunyanga with us today, who is a professor of food and nutrition, or food science, should I say, at the University of Nairobi. Is that correct, Professor? Is that food science or food and nutrition?
Yes, food science and technology. Yes, you're correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you're also the associate dean of the Faculty of Agriculture at the University of Nairobi.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, she is the associate professor in the departments of Food Science, Nutrition, and Technology, associate dean, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Nairobi. She is also the coordinator for Food Security Center, a center of excellence. Our research interest currently focuses on food innovations and technologies that can be leveraged towards the reduction of food and nutrition insecurity using sustainable food systems approach in a holistic, transdisciplinary, and interdisciplinary approach to promote the consumption of safe and nutritious food for better nutrition and health outcomes. It's an amazing honor to have you, Professor Kunyanga. All right, so we will try to be as direct as possible, but before I proceed, I'd like to remind our audience to please post your questions in the chat box, or if you want to ask your question directly to Prof, you can kindly raise your hand and I'll bring you onto the floor on the panel and you can ask your question directly. Otherwise, you may kindly post your questions in the Q&A box and I'll check momentarily. All right, Prof, the burning question to start with is there a food crisis in Africa? I'm from Nigeria and I grew up in the South, which is considerably better than the northern part of the country where you have very harsh climatic condition and very sometimes volatile political security situations. So I've seen that indirectly though, the case of food insecurity, at least in Nigeria, but you are the expert here. Is it correct to say there's a food security crisis on the continent of Africa?
Yeah, most countries in Africa, in our continent, are actually food insecure. Normally, we even have classification where even some countries are very food insecure. And sometimes we actually call it food and nutrition security. So sometimes there are some even with worse nutrition security. Nutrition security brings in also things like access to healthcare, maternal care, all those things, access to facilities that are very important. So I would say for most countries, we are not in a good place. And the other day I was in my village and I walked through my grandfather's farm, just to give you a perspective of what I'm talking about. And this farm used to have coffee, bananas. We never lacked anything. You would even get yellow ripe bananas, just ripening on the banana tree, and you'd harvest it. We never used to go hungry. But I can tell you right now, if you come to my country, there are places where people actually don't have food. They are relying on one meal per day. And some now, even we have now insecurity, because if you have a good farm, if you've worked hard and maybe you have a cassava in your garden or some plantain or maize, you'll get now young people coming to steal. We can no longer have that security where you used to grow your food or leave your food out there, no one would pick, because people do not have food to eat. The poverty level is getting to be worse. People, the hunger, if you look at the global hunger index for some countries, actually, it's getting to extremely serious state. So in short, what we are saying is that we are at a situation where we need to rethink about our food insecurity situation. Hunger and poverty are a reality. And I'm wondering, are we even on the right track towards attaining the Sustainable Development Goal? Some of even African initiatives, the Malabo Declaration, all this, because we are really not in a good place. In Kenya, we are now experiencing what we call El Nino. We had too much rain, which also did not do well a favor to our crops, because if you have too much rain, and then that means then you lose crop So we have post-harvest losses when we have too much crop also. Our small-scale farmers, who are the majority, I would say 70 to 80%, depending on which country you are talking about, also do not have facilities. They do not have the know-how on how to store these crops so that they can eat throughout, because now they do not have those technologies. And I would want at this point to just emphasize that you can only be food secure when you have stable supply of food throughout the year at all times, meaning people should have access to food. It should be available to everyone throughout. It doesn't depend on the season, that this season you don't have, this other season you have too little or too much. No, it means you have food throughout. And not just food, it should be safe and nutritious for a healthy, active life. Now, if you look at that definition, really, how many countries in Africa do you think will meet that one? I don't think even, very few.
Yes.
So you can see now what I mean. Over to you.
So for many of us who are not so much of an expert in nutrition studies, I wonder if you may kindly, first of all, help us demarcate what is food insecurity and nutrition insecurity. Are they the same or are they different?
They are not the same. You see, the definition of food security, according to the recognized definition, is where you have access to food throughout for everyone, and that food is safe and nutritious. But you see, nutrition security goes beyond that. Do you have access to infrastructure? Do you have like roads? Do you have health care in the household? Because you see, some of these things actually hinder for you to have access to food. For example, again, I'll give an example of my village. I was there. I come from the highlands where we produce a lot. But do you know, we cannot take it anywhere sometimes because our roads are very poor. Are you getting what I mean? You have milk, you are pouring that milk because you have excess, but your neighbor in another county or another state actually doesn't have that milk but need it. But now you do not have a good distribution network. The infrastructure is very terrible. And if you go to most African countries, that's the situation where we have high productivity. Actually, infrastructure is very poor. So we are not able to distribute that food. And that's why I was talking of post-harvest losses. So they will pour that milk. If you have seen even some counties where actually people are making mango juice for cows because they don't have anywhere to take the mango. It's too much. So on one extreme, we have some places where it cannot grow. It's marginalized. It's dry land, or what we call semi-arid and arid. But on the other hand, we have these islands where they are producing so much that would actually be used by those people. But because now we do not have good infrastructure, that hinders. So nutrition security goes beyond even how you utilize that food, health care, even mostly for maternal and children, because those are very vulnerable groups. So you can see that goes beyond even your health. The bioavailability of that food in your body also is a big consideration. So you can see it goes beyond food security.
So your example about the farmlands, it brings to mind, anytime I log onto YouTube, if I log onto YouTube 10 times, I'm very sure 4 out of those 10 times, part of the suggestion that I'll see are these young African entrepreneurs who are, should I say, trying to address that gap between abundance in production and getting those abundance to the market that actually needs them. So we've seen this amazing number of young Africans starting farms, doing business in the transport sector of the agriculture, in this transport corridor of the agriculture sector, or even like introducing new farming techniques. So, and these are younger entrepreneurs. So I wonder, is it the case that we are not seeing sufficient entrepreneurial influx into the agricultural sector, or is it that there are sufficient number, it's just that they're not getting the support they require, or what is hampering their flourishing?
Actually, we call that agribusiness, and a lot of young people who have gone through a course like agriculture and food security are trying their best to get into agriculture, but in a different way from what my mother would do or the older generation. And actually, that has been my passionate thing. Today, at a session with the youth, linking them, we are calling it the Great Millet Quest. We are bringing millet back, and we are trying to get the youth to innovate around millet so that we can grow millet, which is climate resilient. It's not so hard to grow like maize, which we are, most countries, we have over reliance on maize, you see. But now the youth slowly are getting into agribusiness, doing things the right way because they have the technology, they understand the issues, they can mechanize maybe some of the processes that lead to losses, for example. But the problem is sometimes when, and because I work a lot with the youth, they have ideas, yes, but if they are not facilitated, if they are not supported, they are not able to do this. Because remember, we are talking of smallholder farmer. I was looking at a land, a family with 1 acre of land, and there are 4 people, 4 sons, and they all want part of that. So do you think you cannot do sustainable agriculture that way? And as much as that youth, for example, given that land, to use even some of this technology would be very difficult. I think it's the high time we had investment in youth in agriculture, and also that our governments really takes this seriously, that the youth need to be supported. Because now, the youth unemployment is very high, and the jobs in the government are very few. But we have self-employment. If they are empowered, if they are supported, and if African governments actually invested in agriculture, sustainable agriculture, these youth have ideas, but they don't have that capacity to actually go into business. I know some, like our government, you'll hear youth funds, you'll hear some loans, but when you come to the real sense, that money is not enough to do something profitable for them. But I know they are trying. I know I've worked, for example, I have a project in one of the counties near Nairobi that supplies most of the poultry we eat as meat, and it's managed by youth. But now they are running away from it because it's not profitable. They are trying, but if you look at the cost of feeding, it's very high. Cost of vaccination to maintain that small chick to a big poultry requires investment. So most of them are trying to do this and that, but if it doesn't work, they are trying hydroponics, they are trying urban agriculture of all sorts. But if it doesn't make money, really, you run away from it. So we really need to rethink, what do we need? How do we need to empower our youth so that they can do sustainable agriculture, combine it with agribusiness, market their product so that they get some income? For me, of course, if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't give you profit, if you cannot build a house or buy food or sustain your family, really, it doesn't make sense. Farming will not make sense. So
Right.
we have to see it as a business. Yes.
Yeah. So in terms of that profitability and should I say capital question, I've been taking courses regarding how to access government support for if you have interest in agriculture or fishery, whatever, since I was in secondary school. So I'm very sure my colleagues across the continent have been encountering the same thing ever since we were pretty much younger. And I mean, you just said it, until now, many of those supports are not there. However, we've seen many private corporations try to create loan or some form of capital for many young folks going into this business. And still, several of the complaints we have from our colleagues is that they are investing a lot still in the agriculture business, but it's not so much yield than what you can expect to say, for example, if you start a tech company. So how do you see the role of private sector in helping our young colleagues on the continent to be better interested in agriculture? Is it only about capital, or is it only about new technology access to manage their farming or animal husbandry techniques? Or what are those things you think the private sector in Africa could do to help?
Yeah, actually, the private sector is playing a big role. If you ask me, there's more wins we have actually through the private sector. And I've just given an example. We were just doing an official launch of Unilever, working with university students to bring back millet to the market, make products from millet, innovations from millet. And they're supporting students to do this. For example, I work for a university. So what we are actually doing is to link up with the private sector. We recently also launched an agricultural and innovation center where we are partnering with the private sector. Like one of our biggest partners is actually one of the biggest distributor of agricultural inputs. And that's the way to go. The private sector, I know, is playing a big role, but I think we still need to strengthen that linkage, especially between academia and also the industry, because there are a lot of brains coming out from our universities doing agriculture. Actually, before, if you ask me, in the last 5 years, we had a very low intake in students in agriculture because they were not getting jobs out there. But now it has gone up. Actually, people don't want to do medicine or law. They want to do agriculture. They say agriculture, that's where the money is. And I'm happy when I see that. And they are making agriculture seem cool again, which is what we want, actually, and really trying their best. And with the private sector now coming in, I see a lot of things changing. As a university, for example, and as a faculty of agriculture, we are really doing our best to work with the private sector. If I can tell you the partnership we brought to the faculty of agriculture, there are many. So we are hoping they can absorb those students or graduates in agriculture to actually transform the agricultural sector. And also, even later, when they clear their school, that they can actually help them to start businesses, start agri-businesses and boost agriculture. That's the way to go, because if you depend on government, on everything, the way Africans say, you can't put all your eggs in the basket. So I see the role of private sector as very pivotal in promoting youth in agriculture and youth in food security. That one, I believe, is the right way to go.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So before I segue into the environmental or climatic question, I want to remind our audience to please add your question to the Q&A box so we can ask Professor Kunyanga. So we have a question from Oyekachi Ogu, and they want to know, could there be a way to overcome environmental hindrances to food security? Is that even possible?
Yes, it's possible. I think for me, I find that in everything we do, because there are issues to do with food safety, environmental health, is about being responsible as an actor in a food value chain or in a supply chain. You just need to know you are taking care of that environment, because we have generations that will come later. So all the practices or technologies that we are coming up with as a university and we are disseminating for the farmers to adopt, they must be technologies or practices that safeguard our environment, because this is our future. This is our legacy to our children, the next generation. So if a technology or a practice actually degrades the environment, that is not a good one. And that's why working with the university, both for private sector, for government, when they work with the university, then they adopt the correct technology, they adopt the correct practices. Like now, if you look around, most of the research priority areas are moving towards agroecological practices. No chemicals, nothing. We want to grow our food the way we used to do. And we used to have bumper harvest. I just gave you an example. My grandmother's farm used to get everything, and she never used to spray anything. But now some of the varieties that have come up, you have to spray so many chemicals. That brings a lot of food safety issues, which now means we are even more food secure, because people start getting cancer, dying of cancer. So for me, the environment is very important. We need to safeguard our environment. So whatever technology you promote out there has to be able to avoid environmental pollution and also degradation, the environmental health. And I believe in every country, I know we have these regulatory bodies. Like Kenya, we have NEMA that regulates environmental issues. But now they need to tighten. You know, you can have a regulatory body, you can have policies and guidelines, but you have to implement them. You have to make sure people are following. They're not dumping things on our rivers. They are not polluting our rivers, because that's our source of water. So I think this is a very critical area. And as a faculty of agriculture, for us, we are very keen on environment. And I just want to mention at this point that the late Professor Wangari Maathai from our country, they won a Peace Nobel Prize for environment. And she fought. She fought for people not to cut trees. She fought for people not to pollute the environment. You can do the same. It's a personal, you just take that responsibility as a scientist, as a youth, any person, just say, I want to safeguard. Plant trees. You remember our president just said the other day, gave us a target of how many trees to plant. That is the way to go, but not speaking, but by action, because I know politicians will talk a lot, but we actually need to do it by actions. Plant a tree, 3 or 2. Say, tell your children, that tree I planted this year, that's what we need to see. And the young people need to get this trend.
Yeah, I mean, Wangari Maathai is one of our personal heroes at African Liberty. I don't know too much about President Ruto, though, but Wangari Maathai definitely.
Yes.
So I was wondering if we can take a couple of steps back. Let's let's reverse course and try to, should I say, define for the sake of our audience the main environmental questions we are looking at here, because your response lumped in together a lot. You talked about chemicals, you talked about something else, but again, I grew up in Nigeria, and one of the most pertinent questions we had before I moved to the US was how to replenish Lake Chad Basin. And because it was drying up, and many of the people along that Nigeria, Chad area who are invested in agriculture gets their irrigation from the Lake Chad Basin. So that's the one that comes to mind. But again, I know there are numerous environmental challenges on the continent, but what are those main ones, apart from the ones that we know, the usual suspect, climate change or drought?
So for me, first of all, I normally start with the basic. So we know that we have resources, natural resources that are very key. Our trees will attract rain. This we learned even in high school, right? So we start by not cutting or ruining whatever we already have, our waters, our forest. But you still see people going to settle in a forest and actually cutting trees to settle or to do agriculture. Okay, and even some governments encouraging this. That is the first basic. Then go to our water resources. You know, water is a big issue in Africa, water security. If I was to talk about just a topic of water security, we'll be here the whole night. So you can imagine people polluting our waters, and in different ways, from the fuels, from our vehicles, from dumping garbage in our waters, from runoffs, from our chemicals, pesticides that we use in our farms. There are so many ways. Industries that, now with Africa now into industrialization. Our waters, I'm telling you, we don't know what we are taking. And you see that when you use the same water to grow crops, that some of the effects will go to the crop, and when you eat as a person, then they are toxic. So we actually even affecting our future generation. We have teratogenic effect, mutagenic effect. So the children we are producing.
Sorry to cut you. So is not the case that once the plant absorb water, they filtrate the bad elements, or they just absorb everything?
No, not necessarily. There are some chemicals that will still, they are systemic. We call them systemic, that will still remain in the crop. So when you eat, even fish, when you pollute your oceans and the lakes, those chemicals go to the fish. When you eat the fish, and now leave even that one alone. Now we have antimicrobial resistance. All these drugs you're giving your animals and hormones to produce more or to cure diseases, they remain in the system. So the milk and the meat you eat or the fish you are eating, all those toxins bioaccumulate in your organs and in your tissues. Then you get cancer even at 40, and then you say, where did this cancer come from? It's so easy. It's just coming from what we've done to the environment. So anyway, there are so many instances I can label, but the key thing is to be responsible. I'm seeing even small issues like use of plastics. You know, Kenya banned plastics, and I was so happy because I would just drive somewhere and you see all these plastic bottles and polythene papers dumped somewhere, and the picture is not so good in the parks everywhere. Even for tourism, it goes down. So the environment can really be a big issue. But now since we banned, I'm telling you, some places you go, it's so clean. You even you enjoy that environment, staying in that environment. So for me, I'm looking at it in so many different ways. But depending on which sector you are, who you are, for me, I think there are so many ways you can approach this. But the bottom line is that anything that you think will contaminate your water, affect your trees, any natural resource in the environment that we count on as human beings, to survive, then you are actually ruining the environment, including some livestock production system, by the way. You see, like this battery cage system, all these emissions going to the air, they are affecting all our fuel in the cars, those carbon miles, those things, all that, gas emissions. So it's, there are so many issues here with the environment.
Yeah, so thinking about solutions now, we strongly, I mean, we spent a lot of time on this webinar talking about young people's entrepreneurial capacities in the actual, should I say, the production process, planting and transportation. But we are also seeing a very unusual increase in the number of young people, young entrepreneurs going into recycling or addressing the environmental challenge. I mean, I can say a lot about Lagos. I know it very surely happens in Nairobi too. But what are those opportunities for young people in the recycling, in the environmental friendly practices that they could emulate if they're not so much interested in the, actual tilling and taking care of animals side of the agriculture sector?
Actually, they are calling it a circular economy. So everything that comes from the environment should go back. So when you recycle, that means then you're saving the environment from all these things. And I'm seeing a lot of youth with so many ideas. This is not my area of specialty, but I'm seeing youth, even before we banned our plastics, they are using those plastics to do potted plants or to do this and that, or remelt and do something else that you can use for decoration. So there are so many options, but the youth, I know they have the solutions. The youth, you can count on them to come up with a solution. They will always get a way around. I've seen some composting being selling biofertilizers that is safer, like they decompose or retreat that waste that you think is very bad, ruining your environment. They actually use microorganisms to do even biofertilizer, which you can use to grow crops. So there are many solutions, and I know students in doing environment. I see a lot of proposals coming through our faculty on solutions. And some of them actually really work. So what we really need to do is youth coming up with more of those ideas, recycling all these waste. And I'm telling you, if you go out there, you'll see. I've seen even these car tires being used to plant vegetables in a vertical way. And even if you don't have land, someone will have a lot of vegetables even to sell, to feed the household and sell. So the possibilities, I'm telling you, there are so many. And actually, I was just telling someone during this launch, I was saying that if you look at countries that are now supporting most economies or that are ahead in economies, Japan, China, young people, now not young people, now we are talking of 9 to 12 years, as young as 9 to 12 years, actually those kids are already innovating. They're already thinking, hey, instead of killing our bees, ruining our environment, these bees, we can do something to attract them more so that they do more pollination, we have more crops. I mean, even beekeeping, all these things. And they start very early. Now it's not even youth, the normal youth, you know, in Kenya, like for example, we say youth is from 18, I think, to around 45. I think I'm still in that category. I'm also youth. But now, the people who are innovating are actually younger than even 18. That one I can tell you.
But those people have the capacity, like, should I say, the infrastructural capacity. And that's going to make me pivot into the question of political agriculture. For example, you made mention of water earlier, and that's how it's integral to the whole process. Our crops, extract chemicals from water and whatnot. And it reminds me of the current ongoing politics between Somaliland or Somali and Ethiopia regarding access to the ocean and whatnot. I mean, there's boundless political crisis across the country that are affecting not only farmers, but also limiting the capacity, also the extent to which young entrepreneurs can come into this sector. What do you think should be the thinking of politicians when they think about the consequences of their actions on the agriculture sector?
I can tell you a lot of research has been done, papers written, high-level reports written by big NGOs on the effect of conflicts, civil wars between countries. They really make countries insecure. And if you look at the progress of those countries, they don't move. So that has been well documented. Now, what should we do? This is a clear problem. Even in my country, there are areas we know that has insecurity and therefore high malnutrition, high food insecurity. But what we need is dialogue, especially issues to do with water. There are rivers, like, for example, that run across countries, and therefore when one country does, for example, a dam that would create a barrier to the flow of water, obviously the other country will start a war, will start complaining. I think governments need to come together and dialogue, talk to each other, not fight, talk to each other. How can we best use this resource? How do we use this resource for everyone so that everyone benefits? Because all these we were given by God to share. Because if you are selfish, you say now this river starts from my country, so why should you are supposed to get whatever small that runs to your country as a subsidiary. You see, that's not the way to go. And also, I think with water security, we seriously need to explore new water harvesting technologies. And this is not even a hard thing. I'm telling you, Kenya, we just, even now it's raining. January is normally hot. And I'm telling you, in a few months, we will not have water. People will start saying we don't have water. We let that water go. We don't even need to fight. Because, like, for example, I just did a 15,000 underground with just concrete and cement. I'll have water throughout the year. Normally, I ask, why doesn't the government do this? I know our country, I think there was promise to do dams to capture that excess water, but it never happened. So you can imagine. So even corruption in our country, I don't want to go into politics, but the government have to be deliberate to invest in some of these water technologies. Actually, sometimes we don't even need to rely on these natural water bodies. Even the one that rains, even in your home, just try it. Just have a tank, 10,000 liter. Capture water, treat it. You have water the whole of the year. It's as simple as that. If the government now did a bigger water storage tank or reservoir, that is so easy because they have the money. But you see now, people are not willing to talk. They're not willing to invest in some of these technologies. So we have a problem. And I think investing in agriculture, if you look at it, I don't want to name countries or how much they invest, but I can tell you, in line with AU, what we are supposed to invest in agriculture, very few countries are investing. You will see some even investing 1% or 2%. It's not barely enough to do anything in agriculture. So the national governments need to deliberately improve the investment in agriculture, including water. You see?
Right. Okay, Prof. Yeah. So to bring it home, of course, we are a very youth-focused organization, and as you said, you work with young people as a professor. And on this call, I'm definitely sure 99% of the people in attendance are young people. So what would be your advice? I mean, you've already mentioned a lot, but your departing advice to the young people listening regarding how they can be a fruitful part of the conversation regarding how to move our agricultural capacities to the next level.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things is first not to change our attitude. Because I just mentioned our faculty, we increased our intake of students doing agriculture, but we really need to see agriculture as a cool course, just like medicine. Because actually, I can tell you, there are guys in agriculture making money more than even a medical doctor. That one I can tell you. So the youth need to see agriculture in terms of agribusiness. That is a business. You can invest in agriculture, make money. That is number one. Because I know youth, they want money, they want to build their lives, right? Yeah, they need to now to change their attitude. That is not about ICT. Actually, you can bring now. Actually, let me hit this one home. We need to invest in digital technologies, ICT, bring ICT, digital technologies in agriculture. That's how you make it cool. Don't do agriculture the way your mother does or the way your grandmother used to do. You can actually make it sexy. Forgive me for using that word. Make agriculture sexy. All those the ICT you are saying they're investing, why can they use them in agriculture? Solve some of the problems we are experiencing. Because if you go, I know our faculty, like Department of Agricultural Economics, they have developed apps in the phone where you can get the right variety, the seeds, because you see that those are some of the issues we're having on the ground. Access to quality inputs like seeds, fertilizers. But my mother doesn't know how to use a smartphone. Yet they have young people here tammacking here in urban areas looking for cool jobs. Why can't these youth go back, bring those technologies back to agriculture, revolutionize agriculture, make it cool? Let me use that word. I don't want to use the other one. That is the opportunity. Apart from that, change our culture. Our culture, this culture of eating maize. I'm sure if I come to Nigeria, I love to eat cassava or maize. If you come to Kenya, ugali is a must. You go to Tanzania, Uganda, Zima. If you go some countries, they'll call it Zima. It's the name that changes, but I'm telling you, some staples have been there forever. But yet we have other crops that actually are more nutritious. They have better health benefits. Why can't our youth now bring back those crops that actually meet our current needs? We don't have to have that culture of if it's fish, and this type of fish because of our cultures. We need to bring, or even religion, sometimes it comes to that. And then obviously adopting best practices, embracing technologies in agriculture. Because if you go outside, I'll give an example. I went to Australia in a farm managed by a young couple, youth actually, because they were less than 30 years. They were running 2,500 hectares alone of land. They had a winery. They were doing sorghum for the animals, for the feeds of the animals. They were doing their own vegetables for home consumption. And 2 people, but because of technology, that farm even in Africa, you need, I think, 200 people. You see? But now, if we embrace technologies, if we embrace best practices, and we have right investments, I think youth can transform agriculture, and therefore we can achieve food security. If the youth change their attitude, embrace agriculture, use digital technologies, ICT, I see ourselves transforming how we do things. Because the way my mother does things, she will still till that small land, get 1 bag, and she's comfortable. But I know a youth, given that the same land, using the same good technologies, good practices, can get even 10 bags from the same land. That's where we need to go.
All right. Thank you, Professor Catherine Kunyanga, for your expertise and guidance. And of course, thank you to everyone who joined the call. And I don't know if we can take this one question by Rodney Ellen. I think they're asking, what do you have to say on GM crops on food security? Because I think I missed that part of my question. I still have a lot of questions to ask about genetically modified crops. If you can do that in 1 minute, that would be so much appreciated.
Now, if those who are on the call can go Google, we just published a paper on GM with our National Biosafety Authority, which is the regulatory body for biotechnology. Let me start by saying this. As I mentioned, and why I was saying youth and technology, some technologies are very good. There is the answer, because we cannot keep growing 1 bag in a very big area. The yields are going lower. So we need to optimize the small land we have higher yields, but produce safe foods. Having said that, also, we need to use some of the technologies like GMO with caution. And I know in my country, we've had several bans on GMO. We are one of the countries that we are yet to embrace GMO technology. And why? Because the public has not been sensitized. We've not created enough awareness on GMOs and some of the safety issues that people are raising, which are actually, some are genuine. But before you introduce any technology, you need to assure the public that that technology is actually safe, and that technology will not harm the environment. It will not harm the consumer's health or place consumers at risk, and actually is safe for use. And some of the technologies we have, like what they are mentioning with GMO, the problem, like for example, Kenya, people are saying, yeah, we have a regulatory body, but are they well equipped to regulate? For example, if GMO came, some were asking me, so would
I think we lost Professor Kunyanga there.
Have we adequately, for example, tested GMO to make sure that GMOs are safe to eat? Now, if scientists can answer that question and make sure that the public is okay, then adopting some of those technologies, because we've seen other countries, they are working, then we are okay. But the problem, as I told you again, investment in agriculture, in some of these technologies, is very minimal. People do not want to invest in this because that's all the consumers are asking. Just show us that it's okay and we'll embrace. But we do not place emphasis on that. Governments just wake up in the morning, your president says, now we are adopting GMO maize, and that's it. They do not consult the public, they do not do any test, or the regulatory bodies don't do anything. Are you getting my point? That is the problem. Not that those technologies are not okay, but they are fine in terms of improving our yields, meeting food security, and making sure that we have the correct foods on our tables. But that consumer, who is me also, I need to be assured that that food is actually safe for consumption. And remember my definition of food security. I said that food has to be safe and nutritious. If it doesn't meet that, and if I don't have evidence for that, then I will not want that food. I hope I've answered at least part of it. I don't want to go into politics.
Yes, you've answered quite a lot of it. Thank you, Prof. It's been a pleasure having you. And thanks to everyone who joined the webinar this month. We'll see you on the next one next month. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your January. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.